Hi everyone, it's Kendall here, and this week we have week 8 of our Brackman mystery series. So, without much further ado, and I'm already probably going to do a lot more talking throughout the video, let's spin that wheel. Brackman ID 1619 gives us a block that was known by 3 different names, being the Beggar's Block, Cats and Mice, and the Roman Square. This was by Anne Sargent Wooster and appeared in a book titled Quilt Making: The Modern Approach to a Traditional Craft, which was published by Drake of New York in 1972. Even though these are rail units and we could adjust the pieces to fit a 12-inch block, as this was originally published as 9 inches, the proportions look a little bit too off with so many coming together, so we will be rejecting this block and spinning that wheel again. Brackman ID 1730 gives us the Peekaboo block, and it appeared in Woman's World in 1931. Woman's World was a periodical by the Manning Publishing Company of Chicago throughout the 1920s and 30s. Patterns were also sold by mail order. I did decide to change the way this block looked, in that I switched the fabric placement for the center square throughout this tutorial, and for that I just substituted 1 of the full squares and changed out 4 of the D squares. So you can decide which way you like to do it, but throughout this tutorial I will have this color of the center switched around. Let's get to it. So here we are with all of our pieces and parts cut out, but not as per the cutting sheet, which is linked in the description box below. As I indicated before, I did change how I wanted to color the center square of this block. So I do actually have 1A of my A squares cut at the 4.5 inches in the print fabric. So that means I only have 4 of the background fabric, 1 of the print fabric, and with the D squares I subbed out 4 of those, so I have 16 in my print fabric and 4 in my background fabric. They are the only changes that I made. We're going to start by making the bar units that go around the outside of this block, and it's very much the same as last week's, where the central print square is 2 inches and the 2 background squares are 1 3/4 inches. We'll sew those background strips, not squares, onto each side of our print fabric and press in towards that print fabric. So as I said at the beginning, with the A squares, I have cut 4 from the background fabric and 1 from the print fabric, and I still have the total of 5 as listed in the cutting requirements. And for the D squares, I still have a total of 20, but 16 of them are the print fabric and 4 of them are the background fabric. Now we do need to make 4 of the background fabric. I don't know why I kept putting that square aside, and I am going to show you in this demonstration doing the center square rather than the other ones, but they're all done exactly the same. And to create this square in a square unit, we are going to bring in the folded corner clipper tool. You could use the foundation papers that are available from the Fat Quarter Shop for these, and I have a link in the description box below to the correct size for that. The way I do them is to use my folded corner clipper tool, as I said, as we need to just do a sew and flip on all 4 corners. So we bring our tool in, we line up all of our markings, and we cut the excess off before we take it to the machine to stitch our 1/4 inch. I don't always line it up perfectly, and as you can see here, I'm just using that 1/4 inch mark on the ruler to go from corner to corner and slicing it off. As I have said in previous videos, I do find that that makes it a touch more accurate, and I can't explain why. I just do what works for me, but the tool is originally intended to line all the line markings up, as I showed you in the first example. So we need to put a sew and flip on all 4 corners of all of these squares, and we can do the 2 opposing ones at the same time. In the same vein as my change of use of the folded corner clipper tool, you can bring any ruler that has a 1/4 inch mark on it and just line that up from corner to corner before slicing the excess away and taking it to the machine and stitching your 1/4 inch. As you would have seen throughout this footage and right now, in fact, in all instances, I pressed out away from that center fabric and you have your square in a square. And if you notice, my edges are not completely square and it's not actually 100% perfect, but it all comes out in the wash. We just now need to make the other 4, and as I said, these 4 will be made with a base of the background fabric and having all of the little print squares instead. We now have all of the pieces that we need, all of the units to make up this final block. So we'll bring everything back in that we had previously created and we will lay this block out, paying attention to our rail units that they go horizontally on the top and bottom and vertically on the left and right hand sides. With that change to the center square, I just think that this block looks a little bit better. Not that there was anything wrong with how it looked originally. Just for me and the quilt that I'm making, I changed over that center, so the choice is up to you. With this laid out, you can see that it is now in its final 9-patch orientation, and as such we will start by sewing all of our vertical seams and then our horizontal seams. For the vertical seams, we will press always towards those bar units, so on the top and the bottom row that is in towards that center unit, and on the bottom row it's out towards the sides away from our square in a square. When we do our horizontal seams, this will see all of our seam allowances nest really nicely, but I have one more thing for you to do before pressing those horizontal seams. So for pressing after this horizontal seam, what I am actually going to do is put a clip into but not through the stitching line on each side of that peak of the square in the square. What this allows us to do is press everything towards those rail units except that center part of the seam, so where they're not pressing against, there's 6 layers of fabric in that point, and then if you fold it back over, you are making that 8 layers of fabric. So just put a little snip in either side of that, or deal with the seam allowances in whatever way you can. As you can see, my background fabric is quite see-through and it does create a shadow line, but once this is all layered up on the batting and quilted, that will disappear. It's just something that I do to help deal with the bulk of the seams. We're going to attach this final row, give it the same treatment by clipping into it, and the block for this week will be done. You could use the Quilt to make your square inner square blocks, and for that you would need shapes 5 and 6. For a 9-inch version, you could also use your 1.5-inch strip die to cut the strips, but I would really only do that if I was to be making an entire quilt out of these. As I said, to make the 12-inch version minus those rail units, you would need to use the 8-inch mix and match cube. I don't own that one, so I am making this out of the 6-inch mix and match cube, which will give me a 9-inch finished block. I am running shapes 5 and 6 through here to do just the square inner square units. I have previously rotary cut the 1.5-inch strips I need for those rail units, but I thought I could take this opportunity to show you how to line these ones up. The shape 6 in and of itself doesn't have any of the engineered corners, and sometimes you could get a bit confused on how you put your first 2 shape 5s on, because once you have the first 2 on, everything then lines up nicely. So it's not rocket science and it's not actually that difficult. We'll take our center square, and again I'm going to do this on the print one. And then we take our shape 5, being our quarter square triangles here, and mine got a bit stuck in the die board, but that's okay. I'll trim those little threads off that have come out. And then we need to line these pieces up as best we can in the center of shape 6. So moving that quarter square triangle on the side until you have equal bits showing out on either end, and then that's ready to take to the machine and stitch. If you don't trust your judgment in eyeballing the excess sticking out on either side, you can fold both pieces in half and then just match up that crease line, and you'll have that perfectly placed in the middle. As always, when I am working with the Quilt, I am going to press these seams open, and once we've done that, you'll notice that the remaining pieces that we need to add to the other 2 sides will now perfectly align up with these edges now that we've put these first 2 pieces on. I'm unsure why Quilt doesn't do the engineered corners on the square. That way you would just be able to set and forget, but it's really not that difficult. You just have to pay a little bit of attention. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of the rest of these made now, and I will see you for some optional layouts. So here is what the original colouring of this block would look like on repeat. It does create some secondary patterns, and actually when you look at it you can sort of not really see what the original block was intended to be. Here it is with just my slight change of changing the coloration of that centre block, so not much different, just a little bit more white or background fabric to let your eyes rest. As always, you could just add the sashing and cornerstones, as I am known to do in these examples. Doesn't really change it all that much, just helps make the quilt a little bit bigger and easier to sew together. You're not matching up all of those seam allowances. I thought also, carrying on from last week, we could take a look at what it looks like on point, and I think that that's a little bit more interesting with all the sashing, cornerstones, setting triangles. It's a little bit more work, but it looks quite all right. I then thought, what if we reverse the colouring of the blocks completely and used a combination of those? And here is what that would look like with the classic sashing and cornerstones. And once again, with this version of having the reverse colours, I thought, let's have a look at what that would look like on point. As with all of these blocks, this would look excellent made with lots of scrappy fabrics. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks, for our Brackman Mystery Series. I am really enjoying putting these blocks together, and I hope you are too. You will notice that sometimes I include the rejectant block and how to make it, sometimes I don't. It just depends. And sometimes I forget. I am only human after all. If you haven't done so already, I'd love for you to like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe if you haven't already done so, tickle that little bell icon once you are subscribed. You'll be notified of all my upcoming releases and you won't miss a thing. I'll see you all again next Saturday. Bye for now.